The US and Israel continue their attacks against Iran on the second day as well. The goal, says Donald Trump quite openly, is to overthrow the regime. The decapitation strikes have been largely successful for the Israelis. Several high-ranking members of the Iranian leadership were killed, including the spiritual leader Ali Khamenei and many others. Meanwhile, Iran is striking back across the Middle East with drones and rockets and, according to the statement, has closed the Strait of Hormuz. We want to talk about everything we currently know here in this video, and of course, also provide the appropriate assessment. Holy smokes, now save the most at Holy with my code. Donald Trump said in a speech that it's about preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, eliminating its missile program, eliminating its naval forces, and stopping the axis of resistance from endangering U.S. forces. He also calls on the population, meaning the Iranians, to take back their country once the U.S. is done with the attacks. Israel began the fighting with decapitation strikes. I'll briefly summarize what happened yesterday, since not everyone followed the 8-hour live stream. The attack took place yesterday at 8:10 in the morning local time, during normal working hours, while the Iranians had expected it at night. That probably allowed Ali Khamenei, instead of being in the deepest bunkers, to be in another bunker together with his staff, and that enabled the Israelis to kill him. What's also interesting is that it is now being reported that the Saudis were among the advocates for the attacks. So together with Israel, they especially influenced Donald Trump to start the war. As I said, that's how it all began. It started with major decapitation strikes, and the Israelis say that the entire Iranian leadership is the target, both politically and militarily. Currently, in the past, and in the future. If the regime is to be removed, this is exactly the right way, because the entire leadership must go. There are also reports that, for example, Ahmadinejad's house was attacked, and I believe he hasn't been the Iranian president for over 10 years. In the meantime, the report has been released that he was also killed. Theoretically. And that would probably be the justification. If there is a large-scale killing of current leadership, then some former leader could come and take over leadership based on their past authority. And especially since he has already led in the past, he was involved in this regime. So he is loyal to the regime and could therefore continue to lead the country as an interim leader or something similar. And it seems that the Israelis want to prevent this by killing everyone on a large scale, and are currently in the process of killing everyone, anyone who has, had, or could have any leadership position. At the same time, this also puts pressure on everyone who has any influence to distance themselves from the regime, because now everyone who has any say knows that they are personally at risk. And of course, this also means that at the same time as these attacks, the coordination of the resistance is being disrupted. Because every time a commander is eliminated, the organization beneath him falls into disarray for several hours at first, until the successor has taken control. The killing of Ali Khamenei has now also been confirmed by the Iranian side, so he has indeed been killed. But in addition, the list of those killed is not yet complete. So also, and this is not a complete list, in addition, the Secretary of the Defense Committee, the Commander of the Revolutionary Guards, the Minister of Defense, Khatam al-Anbiya, the Head of Intelligence, the Chief of the Supreme Leader's Military Office, and the Chairman of the Organization for Defense Innovation and Management were also killed, just like the previous chairman of this organization. And the Chief of the General Staff has also been killed in the meantime. The Iranians say that 40 military commanders have now been killed. Khamenei's son, who was a potential future spiritual leader and was considered a successor, he was also attacked. His personal status is still unknown at this point, so we will have to see when the first ones leave. However, if they want to leave, of course they need capital, because their salary won't be paid then. And while most Iranians are under sanctions, that wouldn't help them. But as long as they are not also sanctioned by the Americans, today's sponsor can help them build a portfolio that, in the event of a U.S. decapitation campaign, would allow them to have something to live on if they flee abroad. We live in a time when political and economic developments are happening faster and faster. Conflicts, elections, or geopolitical decisions often have an immediate impact on the financial markets. That's why I think it's important to have a partner when investing, who not only enables trading, but also helps to put these connections into perspective. That's exactly why I use XTB, and XTB has arranged a free stock for you. I'll explain to you in a moment how you can get it. What I appreciate about XTB is this combination of information and opportunities to act. Through the integrated news section, you can see which events are moving the markets and invest directly based on this information. This enables informed decisions instead of blind reactions. Trust is just as important to me. XTB already supports over 2 million people with financial matters, including German customer service and real representatives. That is a crucial point, especially when it comes to long-term financial decisions. I also find the conditions very convincing. You can invest up to 100,000 euros in trading volume per month commission-free in over 9,000 stocks and ETFs. For long-term investors, saved fees make a significant difference over the years. And if you are currently still waiting for the next investment opportunity, new customers currently receive up to 2.3% interest on uninvested funds for the first 90 days. And as mentioned at the beginning, at the moment, when you open an account, you also get a free Hugo Boss share. Click the link in the video description or scan the QR code. Open the account completely, agree to the terms and conditions in the app, and deposit any amount. That's all it takes to secure your share. So, what are you waiting for? Start now and let your money work for you. The Israelis and the Americans are currently working to enable a coup. In doing so, they are attacking targets that oppress the people. That's how it is. There is evidence here that smoke is visible at the Ministry of Intelligence. Reports of impacts at the Law Enforcement Command are also being confirmed. And this is the first agency used by the Iranian regime to suppress unrest. Impacts are also being reported at command centers that were used for suppression. This is reported here by Trey Yingst, the Fox correspondent for the region. And there are reports of an attack on a Revolutionary Guards base where a Basij unit is being trained, which was significantly involved in the suppression. In total, there were 900 attacks in the first 12 hours alone. And the suppression campaign, the SAD campaign, that is, the campaign to suppress Iranian air defenses, was successful. The Israelis now say that they are flying over Tehran itself with fighter jets. And there are images showing them loading their fighter jets with freefall bombs, not with large standoff weapons that have to be fired from a great distance, but where they are directly over the target and dropping them. And there are also recordings of this. These supposedly show an MQ-9 Reaper, an American drone that is flying over Shiraz here. We have various recordings here, and that would indeed be remarkable, because Shiraz is located right here. That means we're already talking about 100 kilometers inside Iran, where a relatively low-flying slow drone could already be operating without being shot down by the Iranians. If this wasn't an Iranian Shahed 129, which I can't completely rule out based on the small images. So, it's quite possible that it wasn't an American drone, even if that's what was reported, but rather that it was an Iranian one, which, for example, was used for reconnaissance to identify incoming aircraft or something like that. But if it really was an MQ-9 Reaper, then we're starting to talk about a situation where you could even provide close air support for demonstrators if necessary, because they have a long endurance, meaning they can stay on site and circle for a long time. They fly relatively slowly, and as we can see, this model is carrying 2 laser-guided bombs and 4 Hellfire missiles. With that, 2 larger and 4 medium-sized targets could be attacked by this single drone alone. And that would be, for example, a way to take out special forces on the move or something similar, in order to directly support demonstrators. That would indeed mean a way to directly support demonstrators. But attacks on TELs are also being reported. That is, on transporter erector launchers. Those are launch vehicles for the missiles that Iran fires. There are various geolocations showing that corresponding bases have been attacked. And the Israelis have also released a whole series of such recordings again. You can see the launch vehicles here. In this case, the missiles were already erected. And here as well, more launch vehicles that were bombed by the Israelis and neutralized in this way. In addition, there were attacks on drone production. So here, the Israelis called for the evacuation of an industrial facility where drone components are manufactured. That means we see that now they're targeting the arms industry itself. After all, drones are currently being used throughout the entire Middle East. And in this way, of course, you can make sure that fewer of them are used. For this purpose, the Americans attacked last night with B-2S, that is, with stealth bombers. This time, they were used with 2,000-pound bombs, so not with the GBU-57 anymore. Presumably 2,000-pound armor-piercing bombs, of which they can carry a large number on board. And the report is, Barak Javid is an Israeli journalist, a military journalist. He says here that presumably underground sites of launch vehicles for missiles were attacked in order to reduce Iran's ability to launch rockets, because a significant part of the Iranian missiles are launched with launch vehicles. And if these are destroyed, it doesn't help the Iranians if they still have 500 or 2,000 missiles in some warehouse. Without a launch vehicle, you can't fire them. And the smaller the number of available launch vehicles, the smaller the salvos you can fire, which in turn means that they are easier to intercept. Meanwhile, Israel is engaging in vandalism and destroying museum pieces. They shamelessly released a video here showing them destroying 2 F-5S and 2 F-4S. At least this time we haven't seen any footage of destroyed F-14S yet. But unfortunately, that will probably be seen again soon. And now Iran reports that at the school, where it was already reported yesterday, an elementary school was attacked. Iran is now reporting 148 deaths there. This cannot be verified from the outside yet. Apparently, there are also some fake videos circulating, but the attack itself is pretty certain. We have the location here, so that's east of the Strait of Hormuz, or in the northern part, if we want to go that far. And if we zoom in, we can look at the location of the facility itself. I think it was here. Wait, let me pause. Yes, the facility is here, right in the center of this town. And this here is a facility of the Revolutionary Guards, the naval forces of the Revolutionary Guards. And here is this school. We discussed yesterday in the live stream that there are various reasons for this, and here it seems to be a realistic possibility that a weapon aimed at this base missed by a few meters and may have actually killed over 100 children. So, at least based on the position, it seems to be a realistic option that it was actually probably an American bomb. I saw Al Jazeera is already blaming the Israelis, but we know their political stance. The Americans are supposed to operate in this region, and the Americans are currently focusing more on the naval forces, while the Israelis are concentrating on the Tel and the Decapitation campaign. So, it was most likely an American attack. That's why the Americans are already investigating what exactly happened there. And if it's true that this is the elementary school, and this is the military base, then it's likely that this was a stray bomb that caused terrible suffering here. Regarding this base itself, we have Iranian media reporting that the Asef missile brigade is stationed there, which is described in Iranian media as the most important missile brigade of the Revolutionary Guard Navy. So here we have an important Iranian military unit that would be deployed in an operation to close the Strait of Hormuz. And in that context, the location makes sense. For example, it would make sense that anti-ship missiles are stationed there on trucks, which can drive somewhere close to the coast and fire at ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. And since the Americans are taking action against the Iranian Navy and against Iran's ability to close the Strait of Hormuz, an attack on this military base would be only logical and consistent, and that is probably the most likely reason. So, with a high degree of certainty, it was probably an American bomb that hit this school here, even though we can't be completely certain yet. There have already been claims that it was an Iranian missile. That's theoretically possible as well. A dud, a malfunction, or something like that. But the probability currently suggests that it could indeed have been an American bomb, even though this is, of course, not a final assessment. As for the damage itself, the Iranian frigate Iris Jamaran, which is a frigate of the Mouj class, weighing 1,500 tons, was sunk in the port of Bandar Abbas. That also belongs to the Revolutionary Guard Navy there, and a frigate of the Alwat class was also hit. You can see that here in satellite images. Here is the ship as it is burning and being hit. The ship itself actually dates back to the Shah era, and was built sometime in the 1970s, I think in the early 1970s, at a shipyard in Great Britain. Trump himself posted on Truth Social that the Americans have now sunk 9 warships. Meanwhile, the Iranians are striking back. And that was the latest update that Intel has kindly gathered here. The British report that 2 missiles were fired at Cyprus. Oman reports 3 drone strikes. Bahrain reports 45 rockets and 9 drones. It was reported that there were attacks in Iraq, but the final number was not reported. Israel, over 200 rockets and more than 12 drones. Jordan, 13 rockets and 36 drones. Kuwait, 97 rockets and 283 drones. Qatar, 66 rockets. Saudi Arabia, 2 drones. Syria, 1 rocket. And in the United Arab Emirates, 167 rockets and 541 drones have been reported, which attacked there and which the Iranians launched. Meanwhile, there was a heavy impact in Israel, and at the same time, Jonathan Conricos reports that there have already been at least 8 deaths in Israel. The number could still increase, especially since the attacks are practically continuing every hour. So the first fatalities in Israel have now also occurred. As mentioned, the Kuwaitis have reported 97 rockets and 283 drones. And there are recordings here of an impact on a U.S. military base. This was filmed on site by American soldiers themselves. You can hear English-speaking voices in the background. And U.S. CENTCOM reports that 3 American soldiers have been killed. At the moment, I don't see that the location is known, so whether this is related to this strike here, or if it happened somewhere else, is still unclear at the moment, because they are still keeping the details secret in order to inform the family, so that they don't find out from the public. So it's clear that it's still not clear where these casualties occurred. But the Americans have also suffered their first losses because of this. In the United Arab Emirates, 165 rockets and 152 drones were intercepted. The United Arab Emirates reports that 13 more rockets fell into the sea. There was damage on the ground from debris, and out of 541 drones, 506 were intercepted. There were 35 impacts, which killed 3 foreigners and wounded 58 people. So here are the first civilian casualties in the United Arab Emirates. 2 cruise missiles were also intercepted. And for example, here is footage of the famous Burj Al Arab. That's the sail-shaped hotel skyscraper that was hit last night. And the fires that started in the port after the impacts have spread in the meantime. I don't know what the current situation is, but the fires have also continued to spread there. And reports from Abu Dhabi say that a French military base was hit there. However, it is still unknown whether France has already surrendered. So why the attacks on civilian buildings in the United Arab Emirates? That is, of course, an important question, and it's not that easy to answer. One option would be GPS jamming or spoofing, so that the drones don't know exactly where they are and therefore believe they are in a different location and strike there. The military port I just showed you, right nearby, the port is used by the U.S. Armed Forces, and there are residential buildings in the immediate vicinity. So if the GPS is inaccurate, there could be strikes in the surrounding area. Another reason for the strikes, which could explain them, would simply be malfunctions in the drones. Weapons do have errors and malfunctions. That could be another reason. Another problem could have been the mission planning, because it also has to take into account where each obstacle is. The drones themselves are not supposed to fly too high, so that they can't be intercepted too easily. So they have to fly as low as possible without hitting something they're not supposed to hit. If the buildings weren't properly considered, that's a valid reason. In that case, high-rise buildings must be avoided by flying around them. For that, on the one hand, the GPS or navigation has to be precise enough. And on the other hand, the maps also have to be accurate. And, above all, precise enough. And in Dubai, they're building like crazy. In that respect, a map that's 2 years old could already mean that a high-rise building now stands on the planned flight path. All of these could have been reasons. Or, of course, it could have been intentional. It could be that the Iranians want to spread terror in the United Arab Emirates in this way, since they are increasingly dependent on tourism or want to develop it further. And that endangers tourism, and theoretically, that could lead the United Arab Emirates to put pressure on the Americans to stop the military strikes. That can't be answered. I have now told you all the options that seem logical to me. There have also been attacks on Oman. And here we have the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Qatar, who is terribly upset about this, because Oman is the nation that acted as a mediator. When the Americans and the Iranians negotiated with each other, according to reports, they did not sit directly at the same table, but instead handed their respective proposals to a mediator from Oman, who then spoke with the other side. And Oman was the neutral party that helped try to avoid the war. And the fact that there have now been impacts in Oman has caused quite a stir in the Gulf. There was also a radio message stating that the Revolutionary Guards would close the Strait of Hormuz. Accordingly, there is a report here that a ship has already been hit. We see here a tanker that was hit. And in the meantime, it is clear that this ship was not on its way, but was on site at anchor. And interestingly, Iran has apparently now participated in the Russia sanctions, because the attack was carried out on a sanctioned tanker, in this case, the one that was hit here. Currently, this is the situation at the Strait of Hormuz, and we can see there is still some activity there, but hardly any. This ship, for example, has just crossed the Strait of Hormuz. You could see in the last few hours how it passed through here. We can see that there is still some isolated activity in the region, but some of them are not really moving. Here we have an Iranian fishing boat that's on the move, which of course is not being attacked either. The strait is now largely empty. However, the reason for this is not what you might think at first glance. Here we have Salmer Cogliano or something like that. I believe he's a professor of something like marine studies or something at a US university and runs the big channel Military and History with Torsten Heinrich. And he explains here that the reasons for this are, on the one hand, that the ships are simply waiting to see what's going on. Why take a risk when you could just wait 3 days and be done with it? Why else would you risk getting hit? And on the other hand, of course, it's necessary to have proper insurance when passing through here if there's a war zone. And taking out the insurance, possibly negotiating the insurance, takes some time. That means it's completely understandable that hardly anything is passing through the Strait of Hormuz right now, and that ships are currently gathering on both sides. But it's not to be expected that this will stop completely. As you point out here, for example, even during the tanker war, which was part of the Iran-Iraq war, where 450 ships were hit by both sides, there was still traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. That means we can assume that after a certain adjustment period, when the insurance has been adjusted and maybe the Gulf Cooperation Council provides escort protection, then passage through the Strait of Hormuz will resume. And the Iranians have also achieved their first aerial victory, so to speak. There is a report here of a drone being shot down. That was probably a Hermes 900 and not an MQ-9 Reaper. But accordingly, this would be an unmanned aircraft that Iran has now shot down here, which was flying over Iranian airspace. That already happened during the 12-day war. I think the Iranians managed to shoot down 3 such drones there. It's to be expected that this will happen more often. There were also reports that the Iranians had launched MiG-29S, which were intercepted. But I can't find any reliable confirmation of that. That means, as for whether any other air battles have taken place, I currently see no evidence of that. By the way, the Iranians themselves have stated that they are bombing US bases with their F-4 Phantom jets. Well, if that's actually true, then I wish the pilots... Well, I don't really want to wish them much luck, but the chances of success, even just the pilots' chances of survival, would probably be very, very slim. That's it for now. Of course, we'll be covering and observing further developments in the coming days. If you liked this, give it a thumbs up. That helps with the algorithm. If you want a free Hugo Boss share, then use the sponsor. And if you liked it, exactly. Otherwise, leave a comment if you have something to add. If you're new here, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you don't miss future videos. And if you missed it and have a few hours, check out yesterday's live stream. It was actually a new record. We had almost 27,000 live viewers at the peak here on the channel, and another 1,600, over 1,600 on Twitch. So yesterday was an 8-hour marathon that we had here. If you missed it, check it out. A lot of questions were answered there as well. That's all for now. Thanks for your attention. See you soon. Thanks to supporters here and on Patreon for your memberships. I would especially like to thank Oberstleutnant Mahamori, Fomek, Uwe Frame, nickname Tubib, Karsten Schultz, Tikiller42, Alex Rosenthal, Madbest, Vision, Soundlab, Sickwriter, Bear Tinmint, Robert Veal, Matt Burke, Mutter 1000 Janisgu, Anti-X, Sasha Muller, Cunningham 4500 and Eustress. Thank you very much. Without you, this would not be possible.